What if the past had turned out differently?
The Green Bay Packers have won the Super Bowl.
I was told that playing in Green Bay was not an option.
With the 24th selection in the 2005 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Aaron Rodgers, quarterback, California.
I do not assume to be Ron's equal in regard to personnel matters. He's the best. I am, however, Ron's equal in regard to my passion for the Packers.
And Mikowski appears hurt. Oh, Mikowski's in great pain, Ahmad.
And reliable sources now tell CBS Sports that Parcells is very close to accepting a Green Bay Packers offer.
Several months ago, when I accepted this responsibility, I mentioned that I was humbled by it, but not awed.
Gentlemen, let me introduce to you the new head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Phil Bengtson.
What would the past look like? What would the future look like if? All right, that's the official start of Packers What If. Real quick, I'll say to any of the listeners out there, if you have a Packers What If topic that you'd like to have us discuss, let us know at any of either our Twitter account or that email, greenandgoldpodcast@gmail.com or greengold4ever at Twitter, and we'll try to throw that into the queue. But for today, we're going to talk about 2006, which was Mike McCarthy's first year, where we had some interesting circumstances that could have changed Packers history. So we'll go to me from 3 days ago with the backstory. By week 17 of the 2006 NFL season, the Green Bay Packers had endured many trials and tribulations under first-year head coach Mike McCarthy. They were shut out for the first time in 15 years. In fact, they were shut out twice. They gave up an average of 4.5 points per game more than they scored. They were 0-7 against teams that finished 500 or better, losing by an average margin of 18.7 points in those games. Yet with 1 week to play, they found themselves a half game behind the 7-8 New York Giants for the final NFC wildcard spot. If the Washington Redskins could defeat the Giants at FedEx Field on Saturday night, December 30th, 2006, the Packers could clinch a playoff spot with a win against the Chicago Bears the following night. Things looked pretty good for the Packers, considering the 13-2 top-seeded Bears were planning on resting their starters, and the Giants were playing in a place they hadn't won at in 3 years. But on that fateful Saturday night, the Giants were able to take a commanding lead and hold off a furious late-game Redskin rally and triumph 34-28, effectively eliminating the Packers. But what if the Redskins had completed that rally? The Packers did their part the next day, destroying the disinterested Bears 26-7, and completed one of the most unlikely and perhaps undeserving non-losing seasons in Packers history. Had the Packers won, they would have headed to Lincoln Financial Field to play the red-hot Philadelphia Eagles, winners of 6 straight behind backup quarterback Jeff Garcia. How would that have played out? Would the Packers still have made it to Philadelphia? Would they have made it further than that? And what happens in 2007? What if the Washington Redskins would have defeated the New York Giants on December 30th, 2006? All right, well, there's the over-top intro, so hopefully if you didn't know, you're up to date now on what exactly was going on and why this event is important. So, Matt, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll let you take the reins on this. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this one, so I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, let's start out with the obvious here and say that the Packers still beat the Bears the next night. Obviously, you can go into that, especially considering what Lovie Smith did in 2010. Let's consider that the Packers did, in fact, defeat the Bears. Here's what I think could have happened. Given how bad that team was, as you heard in some of the statistics there, they were horrible. They'd already gotten pulverized in Philadelphia earlier in the year on a very embarrassing Monday Night Football game, if you remember that. The main thing is Brett Favre in the playoffs. I know he was better in 07, but in 06 he was still pretty lousy. He was 18 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. He had a 72 quarterback rating, which, believe it or not, was only, I think, a point or two better than he was in 2005 when he threw the 29 interceptions. So he hadn't greatly improved yet under the Mike McCarthy system. So I think they would have gone to Philadelphia, and I think Brett Favre would have had an absolutely disastrous game. Almost like that Rams game. It just would have been atrocious. And to me, what happens there is what happened after 08, I think, especially given the reaction Favre had after that Bears game where he was kind of feeling like he was going to retire. I think Brett, I'm just going to say for the sake of my argument because it's more interesting, I think that what would have happened in the summer of 2008 would have happened in the summer of 2007. And if you remember Aaron Rodgers when he got in the game in 2006 and in the 2006 preseason, as good as he was in relief in 2007, I think that changes a lot of things as far as what happens to Aaron Rodgers' career. I think maybe Favre tries to come back. I'm not going to try to speculate as to where he goes. I think if you send out an immature Aaron Rodgers out in 2007, that changes a whole bunch of stuff as far as the history of the Packers, to the point where maybe they don't mature like they did to win a Super Bowl in 2010. That throws a monkey wrench in everything. I mean, you could argue perhaps that Aaron Rodgers, not that he'd be out of the league, but that he would not have gotten to the point where he's as good as he is now, having to get thrown in a year early. I have confidence that he would have recovered, but it might have taken him longer to get to this level. I'm not saying that he wouldn't get to this level, but I think it would have taken him longer. So my conclusion is that if the Redskins beat the Giants on that night, the Brett Favre Packers parting fiasco happens a year early, and we get Aaron Rodgers starting his career a year less seasoned, and perhaps we get something that throws in the monkey wrench that in the alternate timeline of Green Bay Packers history, they don't win a Super Bowl in 2010.
Okay, yeah, I kind of like the route you took with that. I guess I hadn't really thought about Rodgers having to come in a year early, and I agree. I think if he would have had to come in a year earlier than he did, I think that could have been big trouble. It definitely changed a lot. In today's NFL day, you don't get a big leash as far as starting quarterbacks. If he comes in those first 2 years and doesn't look real good, we're probably drafting somebody else. But I guess the difference that I see with this than you did is I don't see Brett Favre, even if we go into Philly and get destroyed, which I think we definitely would have, like you said. If we go in there and get beat badly, I still don't think he would have been done. He would have retired for a couple weeks and kind of pulled the same thing he did in 2007 after that, or I guess in 2008 after the 2007 season, except I think we would have taken him back with open arms at that point, even though he hadn't been playing real well. I just think knowing that Rodgers was so inexperienced at that point, I think he maybe would have wanted to retire for a little bit, but I think he would have, if he wanted to play 3 more seasons after he retired, when he actually did, don't think there's any way he would have been able to just be done after that season.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up, and that's kind of the point of this segment is things you don't think about kind of come across while we're discussing here. And I just thought of another thing. Let's say what happens in 2008 happens in 2007, completely identical. When Favre calls their bluff and reports to training camp with an Aaron Rodgers who the only 2 times he's ever gotten in a game, remember it was that Baltimore Monday night game his rookie year, and then the Patriots game in 2006 when he broke his foot and was downright terrible, maybe they cave. And then what happens to the Packers-Aaron Rodgers relationship? Is he the one that gets traded? And I'm not going to try to speculate to where he would go, but it's entirely possible that Aaron Rodgers gets traded out to Buffalo, or he gets traded down to play for the Miami Dolphins, and maybe Aaron Rodgers right now is, who knows, maybe he's an Alex Smith, maybe he's Jamarcus Russell. I mean, he's the kind of guy who, with the skill set and the character, it's hard to unremember all the stuff we've seen from Aaron Rodgers so far. But who knows if he has to go learn a brand new system, if he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Maybe he's just some dude playing for some team right now, and the Packers have nobody at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could have seen that. With Rodgers' personality, he wouldn't have been content sitting behind Favre for, multiple years with him. I think if Favre pulls the retirement thing in 2007 instead of 2008, I don't think he probably would have done it again the next year, so he probably would have stayed around maybe a little bit longer even, and I think that probably would have driven Rodgers out eventually. So I think with either route we take here, it's changing something here. So either Brett is retiring and Rodgers is forced to come in early and maybe is not the quarterback he is, or Favre stays and Rodgers isn't happy and has to leave somewhere else. So I guess I think that most of the effects of this game would be at the quarterback position. I was kind of researching a little bit like the drafts and everything after that, and that's the year we picked Justin Harrell, and I don't think he would have been gone off the board had we had to move back to the Giants pick. I think we still would have been able to pick him where we were at.
So the draft, you think, would be unchanged?
Yeah, the Giants picked Aaron Ross. We picked Justin Harrell. That probably wouldn't have changed a whole lot. I don't think there's any immediate consequences in terms of us maybe going on to win a Super Bowl or drafting somebody better. But I agree. I think it definitely could have drastically changed our quarterback situation.
I have a question for you. What do you think happens to Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson if 2007 doesn't happen and the Brett Favre thing goes through the way it went through, except without 2007?
Well, I mean, they could have been completely different. I think a big part of the reason why they're looked on so highly now, I mean, they had a rough start at first. I mean, a lot of it had to do with the Brett Favre part, but But if, say, Aaron Rodgers doesn't pan out, that's their big trademark right now. That's what they hang their hats on. Is we drafted Aaron Rodgers late in the first round, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, maybe if that didn't turn out the way it did, and we don't have Brett Favre right now, and possibly a mediocre team, neither of those guys might still be around.
Yeah, you can make a kind of compelling argument that they might have had a total regime change in 2009, because think about this for a second. Ted Thompson's first year as general manager, they go 4-12. Then they go 8-8 with Mike McCarthy's first year, as the stats have shown, completely undeserving of a playoff spot, but for some reason, because of the Washington Redskins, they're able to back into the playoffs. They get blown out. Let's say 2007's another 8-8 year. And that year, kind of looking around, obviously you change the Packers, you take 5 wins off the table, that changes everything. But let's say 8-8 happens again, and the playoff teams were pretty good that year, so they don't make the playoffs, and then they follow up 2 8-8 seasons with a 6-10 season like they did, or with a 5-11 season, or another 8-8 season. It's entirely possible that new president Mark Murphy, who obviously came in a very nice spot, didn't have to even think about changing either of those guys, because when he was hired, they were like 10-1 in 2007. Maybe he comes in and wants to make a statement, and he throws everybody out.
Yeah.
But obviously that's all pure speculation. What if the Redskins would have won? I would say I'm glad they didn't. Will be my final statement on that.
Yeah, it hurt at the time to not make the playoffs, but I think in the long run, looking back, everything probably worked out, the best possible way with that happening.
Exactly. Okay, so that about wraps it up for the first ever Green and Gold Forever podcast. I hope you enjoyed some of it. If you hated it or if you loved it or whatever, feel free to let us know. We appreciate you listening and your feedback. Hopefully we can meet again soon, probably not before the draft. So next time we'll be looking to review the 2012 draft, and by then the new NFL schedule will be out, so we'll be able to talk about some of those things as well. So I want to thank Matt for joining me today. I guess, Matt, do you have anything else before we depart here?
No, I had a great time talking Packers with you, and hopefully we get some fan response here. Make sure to follow us on Twitter or email us with your comments so we can include that into the show next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.